Hey there, this will be a really simple rudimentary demo for making mandala-like forms in Blender and animating them. There'll also be a second video coming after this about how to export these assets so you could use them in augmented or virtual reality. So let's just get into it. So here we have a new document in Blender, and we're going to use a really simple set of tools to do this. The two main tools we're going to use for this process are arrays and curves. So just to start out, let's talk about arrays real quick. I'm going to move this cube a little bit on the x-axis, and then I'm going to press Control or Command A and just apply all transformations. So now this cube, you can see if I rotate it, it's rotating around its origin, which is in the middle. So now I'm going to go ahead and add a modifier, and that modifier is going to be an array. So here you can see that by default, the array setting is going to give you this thing called relative offset, and it's going to do it on the x-axis. So it's moving the cube by the size of a cube, and in doing so, it just looks bigger. So if I go by 3, we just have a longer thing. But if I take this factor and stretch it out a little, you can see now these cubes are spreading out. So that's fine. That's all well and good. I'm going to turn this up to 6 cubes for what we're doing now. Um, there's no rules what numbers you use, though you will want your number to correspond to degrees. So it's good to pick numbers of things that are easily divisible by 360 or easily divide into 360. All right, so I'm going to turn off relative offset and show you you can also do constant offset. In this case, we're doing it by um, just an exact size. So, this is going to be, it's going to offset each cube by 2.4 meters. We're not going to use that either. What we're going to use is object offset. And in order to do this, we need an object. Now we can use anything, but if you use a cube or something as your object or any mesh, you'll see it possibly in your render. So what we're going to do is we're going to add an empty, and I'm just going to add an empty. I can add any empty. I'm going to go with a sphere here. So there it is. And now I'll go back to the cube, and for the object offset, I can either select the empty here, or I can use the little dropper and select it. And you can see at first nothing has happened. But if I move this empty here, so I'm going to move it on the y-axis, you can see now this is bringing everything with it. So how far this object is from the middle of the scene is how far apart your array will be. But it does more than that. So that's just moving it one-dimensionally. We can also, we look straight from the top, move this empty two-dimensionally, and we can get arrays that go in different directions. And of course, we can also go three-dimensionally and move our array around in any direction. This still doesn't look anything like a mandala-like image, but you can see if we rotate this sphere, now we're starting to get it. So I believe if we rotate this by 36, oh no, sorry, 60, what am I thinking? 60 degrees, because 6 times 6 is 36, so 60 times 6 is 360. We'll get our 6 pieces all spread out. And the nice thing about this is you can actually edit these objects and they'll all stay synchronized with each other. As you can see, we can, just in edit mode, by transforming and duplicating our mesh, we can start to make a mandala-like image. However, for this demo, we're going to want to draw with curves. So here, I'm going to select all of this and delete it, and we're going to add a new empty. This time, I'm going to add a cube. It doesn't really matter what shape your empty is, and then I'm going to look straight down on my scene, and I'm going to add a curve. And I'm going to do it with 2 different curves. I'm going to do a Bezier curve first. So there's the curve, and the same thing, I'm going to grab it, I'm going to move it up. So I'll move it up on the y-axis here, and then I'll press Control A, just apply all transformations. So now it's got its middle again, and we'll get this array set up. So we will add an array modifier again. We'll turn off relative offset, turn on object offset, select our empty, and now you can see, there we go. And I'm gonna rotate this by see, 30 degrees. And then for my lines here, I'm going to add them until I get 12. Great. So now we're ready to do this. We've got this circle of lines all set to this object. So I'm going to hit Tab for edit mode. I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm just going to press, well, I'll zoom in a little so we can see better what I'm doing. I'm just going to press A for select all and X and delete everything. So all our lines are gone. So we have two tools that can be useful. For the first one, I'm just going to use this draw tool right here. And with this tool, I can actually just start drawing my designs. And you'll see as I draw, they'll repeat. For new designs, you don't see the whole thing until you finish the line, but I believe when you move them around, you'll see it in real time. So that's pressing G to grab to move the whole thing. And I'll also just maybe add a little wiggle here, another spiral here, just a sharp turn there. And now you see we have this kind of nice radial pattern going on. It's not really a symmetry because it's just kind of going around and around. So we have that design there. So if we use just the standard move tool, we can grab specific points and tweak them, move things around a little bit. I'm just drawing with my trackpad right now, which is really not the best for this. I would really recommend, I'm going to try to dissolve this line because it looked like a weird bump there. I would recommend using some sort of drawing tablet or something if you can, but hey, gotta work with what we have. So there's our first stage. So for the next one, we're going to add a little more complexity to it. We're going to add a mirror modifier as well. So I'm going to press Shift A and add another curve. And this time I'm just going to add a path. G to grab, Y for Y-axis. I'll bring it right up here. Then I'll press Control A, apply all transformations. And now for this path, I'm going to set up a mirror modifier. So I'll search and set up mirror modifier. And then I'm going to add another modifier, which will be another array. Same settings as the last one. We'll turn off relative offset, turn on object offset, and we'll pick that empty again. So you can see the empty is already rotated. So we've got the same thing going on. So now we'll do the same thing. We'll set our count up to 12. Now, if you want different numbers and rotations, that's okay. You just need more empties to do the rotation. So now that we've done that, I will go into edit mode again, and I'm going to press select all and whoops, just delete everything here. And now we'll use the curve pen tool. And with this tool, you have a few ways to use it. One thing we can do is we can just click and kind of make these zigzags. I'll just go with that. But we can also, I'll zoom in a little bit. We can grab the handles on any of these things and then use G to grab to turn some of these handles, which will cause bends in our line. And if you've used any vector program, you'll be familiar with using pen tools, or even just you might use them for selecting in Photoshop, lots of different purposes. So there, we've got some designs, and now we're going to give them a little more substance. So for this design here, I'm going to go to the curve setting. I'm going to go down to geometry and then bevel, and I can just give them a little bit of a round bevel. I'm holding down the shift key because if you go too far, it just turns into a big blob. Give them a little bevel, fill the caps. I'll just zoom in so you can see what that does. That closes up the ends there. You don't want to have a circular cross section. We can, of course, switch to profile. Now they have a square cross section. We can also profile them with an object itself. And using a clever object and taper object can make them look like brush strokes, but that's a little more advanced. So we're going to stick with this for now. So now for the other one, we'll just go and do the same thing. So I'll add a little bevel depth to it. I'll leave this one rounded and the other one with a square cross section. And there we go. We already have this pattern. And now we can do all sorts of different things to animate this. One thing we can do that was in my little demo before is we can add a wave modifier, and you can see right away that'll cause this form to kind of undulate with the wave. And you can do all sorts of interesting things to tweak this. We can change the time offset. We can change the speed. We can give it more height, make it more extreme. And you can see we can do all sorts of interesting stuff with that. I can also go ahead and add the same one here too, but with slightly different settings. Well, so you can experiment with that and make all sorts of different things with that. The next thing that can be really interesting, um, maybe even more interesting than the wave modifiers, is we can actually manipulate this empty to make all sorts of interesting effects. So I'm going to open up my timeline here, and I'm going to go to the beginning of my scene. I'm going to go ahead and hide these wave modifiers so we just see the first animation on its own. But I'm going to go ahead and also turn on the end menu so I can see that Z 30 degrees is kind of the home point for this cube, and then everything else set to 0. So I'm going to actually just set a keyframe for that right now. Just press I in the workspace and you can see it automatically creates it. And then maybe I'll move anywhere on the animation timeline. And now you can see if I further rotate this, you can see these patterns kind of form into each other. We can have kind of an interesting animation here where the pattern kind of slides out. And because we made a keyframe at the beginning, if we want to do that, we could start here. We can actually alternate these keyframes from each other. So we can move this one to the end, move this one to the beginning, and then you can see when it plays, it's going to pull that around. The next thing we can do that'll be really interesting is we can actually move this object up and down. I think especially with like for like an interesting virtual reality space or a game, it would be really cool to have a design on the ground that animates up into some sort of spiral staircase that you can go up. There's all sorts of interesting things. You can also just keep like animating it all around. Just so we can see this a little more easily, I'm going to go into material view and just give these some basic emissive materials so they just stand out more. So here you can see we've animated a rotation. So it grows out. But then we can also do all sorts of stuff. So, I can move this over to here. I can rotate it off axis. I can shrink it down, which will cause all the objects to kind of shrink towards it, just leaving the original one at its original size. I can take that and set a keyframe for that with the I key, maybe move that one a little out, move it a little further out to slow that animation down. And there you can see now we have an animation where this structure opens up and then kind of chaotically dances around to another place. And of course, if we want to see it animate back together, that's okay. We just find our keyframe with the original state and we move that to the end. And that way we have it so the whole thing will open up, distort out, and then find its way back home. So really the sky's the limit. You can also experiment with animating the objects themselves and seeing how moving the object also changes your scene in interesting and somewhat chaotic ways. Scaling the object down has different effects. So there's a lot of different things you can animate. We can also see that we can add that modifier animation back. I just hit it and never took it away. And now we've got the wave rippling going while this all moves around. So tons of options and just tons of creative potential. And, curves are a great way to just draw. You can convert these into meshes, and you can also use mesh patterns to make these mandala-like images as well.